Welcome to the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council with hosts Grace Evans and Moses Brattrud. Stay informed on the top stories on life, family, and religious freedom. Get the facts, stand for truth.
Hello and welcome to the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. I'm Moses Brattrud with Grace Evans, and we are so excited that you tuned in today. We're going to be talking about a couple things today. Grace is going to be talking about how June is, wait for it, Life Month. There are a couple amazing things we can do to celebrate life this month, and Grace will be talking about that. Then we'll be talking about a local school district in Minnesota in Osseo, which is, I think, near Maple Grove. And they are doing some controversial things that Grace will talk about, which honestly, I'm struggling to believe that, but you know what? They're doing it. We'll be talking about some really good news out of Iowa on what they're doing to protect kids in classrooms. And then I'll be giving you guys an update about the presidential race, specifically the GOP primary, which is really a huge event on the calendar coming up that we need to discuss so that you guys can get the facts and stand for truth. Before I forget, however, stay tuned until the end of the episode. We'll be giving you a big announcement about MFC's 40th anniversary annual dinner.
Yeah.
So really excited about that. Grace, take it away.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and first talk about June. As you know, progressives like to call it Pride Month. Matt Walsh recently tweeted out a whole list of holidays. He says, as you prepare for Pride Month, we must also remember to celebrate. And then he goes on to list like 15 to 20 different days that I didn't even know existed. Like I had to Google these to see if he was making them up or not. I won't read them all, but these are all holidays, you guys. One is Gay Uncles Day, Asexual Awareness Day, International Pronouns Day, Non-Binary Parents Day, Lesbian Visibility Day, International Drag Day. I mean, guys, it keeps going on.
I know how you celebrate Asexual Awareness Day. You do nothing with nobody.
Wow. Wow. Anyways.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, there's so many different holidays dedicated to celebrating gender identity. Now, a lot of conservatives have decided to reclaim this month, June, as not Pride Month, but Life Month. And I personally really appreciate our friend Abigail Dodds, who is a wife, a mom, a writer. She writes for World, Desiring God. She's actually a graduate of my school. Or I guess I should say my former school.
Since you are also a graduate now.
That's true. But anyways, June is Life Month because of the amazing thing that happened last year in June. Roe v. Wade is overturned by Dobbs v. Jackson. It was truly amazing. It was a historic day. And so in light of that, we as Christians and as conservatives want to celebrate June as what it is, which is Life Month. So I want to read to you 5 practical ways that we can celebrate and spread the word. These are written by our friend Abigail Dodds. She wrote them on Twitter and Instagram. First, she said, have a party, invite lots of people and make some noise. If ever I want to have a party and make noise, I invite Moses because he has 2 kids. He's also just a really fun, outgoing person. So you would definitely be on my invite list.
I want to just say something really quick from Grace's engagement party a few weeks ago. My daughter ran in and she went up to Grace's dad, Pastor Jeff.
Oh, it's so cute.
And she said, Pastor Jeff, thank you for baptizing me.
That was so cute. And her little voice is so precious.
Yeah, it was honestly yes, I am biased, but I am pretty sure that was objectively very cute.
I just love her. Anyways.
Please go ahead.
The second thing Abigail Dodd says we can do is we can ask our pastor or our Sunday school to announce and promote Life Month to our local church. We can follow our pastor's lead in giving thanks to God for the overturning of Roe v. Wade and asking God for future help, especially in our state. 3, we can email, call, or write our city, our county, and state government officials asking them to declare June as Life Month, whether you're in a red state or a blue state. And of course, we're in a blue state right now. She says, you have not because you ask not. That's a pretty good line right there.
That's great.
The 4th thing we can do is donate to our local pregnancy resource centers and pro-life lobbying groups like Minnesota Family Council. No, that's not my plug. Abigail Dodds gave us that plug, which is very kind of her. I would add you can also volunteer at your local pregnancy resource centers, and you can also volunteer with us. We are now training volunteers, a group of volunteers. More info on that coming soon. We'll need help for our annual dinner. So if you're interested in helping us, reach out to moses@mfc.org. Next, And finally, you can pray for the protection of the unborn in our state and across our nation, of course. And we can ask God to shut down Planned Parenthood and to thwart the plans of the wicked to harm children.
Amen.
Pray that those who hate life would be given life in Christ and turn from their wicked ways. So I just so appreciate Abigail always. And I think that thread is a great reminder of this is Life Month, and here are action steps we can take towards Life Month. Didn't want to spend too much time on that. So let's go ahead and jump right on into this story out of Osseo. I hope I'm saying that right. But it's from the Osseo district here in Minnesota. It received a lot of pushback from concerned parents because they were pushing a lot of gender ideology. And I'm going to break that down for you guys. And really, it's frustrating because it just gets so much worse, honestly. Like, I say something and then there's something even worse after it. Like, It's not just one thing. So let's start. First of all, they announced that they will be flying, quote, progress pride flags inside of all of the buildings within the district, which that's so much money to be spent on flags, beginning Thursday to commemorate Pride Month. So that's beginning today.
I had to Google this.
Mm-hmm.
A progress pride flag, and this is the flag I see. I do see it all around my neighborhood. It's not just the historic rainbow pride flag, but it has this chevron design, and I want to read about this a little bit. So it was designed in 2018. I never saw this until 2020 because of events, but apparently it pre-existed that. It was designed by someone named Daniel Quasar. A quasar is like a type of dwarf star. I'm pretty sure that's not his real name. He added a 5-colored chevron to the classic rainbow flag to place a greater emphasis on inclusion and progression. Quasar's Progress Pride flag, and also, by the way, guys, I'm sorry if you're hearing a lot of noise from our office. A troop of wild elephants has just gone through.
Jeffrey Evans.
Yeah. Quasar's Progress flag added 5 arrow-shaped lines to the 6-colored rainbow flag. The flag includes black and brown stripes to represent marginalized LGBTQ plus communities of color, along with the colors pink, light blue, and white, which are used on the transgender pride flag. So that is the flag that Osseo School Districts is flying inside all of its buildings.
That's so interesting. Okay, I really don't understand what your ethnicity has to do with your gender identity. Does it have anything to do with your gender identity? No. Now, what are they trying to do? They're trying to get all those intersectionality points, like all of the oppression points they possibly can.
Right.
So, yeah, very interesting. Okay, so not only are they doing that, there's more, guys. It just doesn't stop. They released a statement. They said, first of all, they will also be establishing a full month before June every academic year to observe LGBTQIA+. Wow, they didn't include the 2. Which, that's the new acronym. Did you know that? And I looked it up because I was like, what's the 2 even stand for? Because now it's 2+.
Two-spirit, right?
Yeah, Two-spirit.
No.
Isn't that so strange? I had never heard of that.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. Okay. Oh, man. Do you remember this? When we were having our rally at the Capitol, there was a guy and he was kind of short. He had all these tattoos. And I wasn't sure what side he was on. Mm-hmm. And then he started yelling. And not in a rude way, just the sort of way that you do at a rally. And he was telling us about how we needed to protect kids. But then he went on to this thing about how he was Native American and Two-Spirit is a Native American thing, and how he was totally cool with that, and how it's a very traditional thing, he said, in Native American culture. I haven't Googled it. I don't know if that's true or not. But he was like, he's drawing a very fine line between that type of thing and like this idea of victimizing children, which I thought was actually interesting. I have no other comment on that, but it just made me think of that connection that we've actually encountered that in person. I don't know if I assume he doesn't identify as Two-Spirit, but who knows?
Interesting. So anyways, the district is creating a full extra month before June, so July, for the LGBTQIA2+, whatever it is, History and Culture Month. Guys, wow, okay. This is the resolution. They say, the Osseo area schools seek to eliminate transphobia and homophobia in any form. Moses, we gotta get rid of you. And is committed to
I was saying before the show, like, it is quite ambitious that one school district in the Minneapolis area would be able to.
We're Minnesota nice over here.
Would by its actions eliminate transphobia and homophobia in the entire world. There's no qualifier. It doesn't just say Minnesota or even in the Osseo school districts. it just leaves that open to you for interpretation.
Wow. So they're committed to, quote, examining our own practices, procedures, and policies to identify the structural barriers that are embedded and perpetuated in the educational system. So this comes after a year ago, you guys. So last June, the board was resolving that the school facilities needed to provide increased privacy, greater student choice in restrooms and locker rooms, which that just is so counterintuitive and not true. Because if you're allowing like biological males to go to biological females' bathrooms, that is not an increasing of privacy. That is the opposite of increasing privacy. So moreover, you guys, because oh no, it does not end here. The district has also developed an LGBTQ blah, 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 alphabet soup plus advisory group and committee to providing ongoing support for the Assistant Superintendent of Equity and Achievement. Let me say that again. The Assistant Superintendent of Equity and Achievement. To me, that sounds like you're like the assistant to the director of...
I guarantee you that person makes $151,000 a year plus benefits, and that is paid for by the property taxes in the Osseo, and state taxes and federal taxes. So, your tax dollars at work, folks.
It's crazy. So the district sent an email to parents, and they sent them a resource in this email for the parents so that they can better talk to their kids about Pride Month. In that resource, it quotes the YouTuber Queer Kid Stuff, and it tells parents to, quote, make an environment that normalizes the existence of queer people. The article says that parents should read books, watch TV shows with kids that have LGBTQ, blah, 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 plus characters and family structures. And then the report also says, or the resource, also says that it's important to make activism and solutions a part of the conversation. So again, this is all... Again, it's trying to normalize this behavior that is not normal. It's trying to normalize this for kids at a very young age, which is not wise, not helpful to children. It's indoctrinating with them with something that is not true, because it's it's telling them the narrative that you can change your gender is true. They're saying that if you're a boy but you want to be a girl, then that's fine, when you literally cannot become a man if you were born a woman. So here are some parental concerns, because this is the encouraging part, because all of that is pretty frustrating. It's like, wow, okay, great. More bad stuff happening. Well, the parents are speaking out, which is great. Carissa Olson, who's a parent of a student that goes to school there, told Alpha News, a third grader doesn't even understand sexual attraction. This discussion does not belong in schools. So grateful for Carissa speaking out.
Yes.
Furthermore, another mom said, I will be keeping my child home from school for Pride Day. We will make this a pray day and pray for those that are caught up in the lies of this movement, that we may show kindness and love. And I think that's a really good way of phrasing it. I was just in a strategy session with some colleagues today, and we were just talking about, how can we message about gender ideology? Like, what are some top line points? What should our message be? And we were talking about how it's really important to show compassion. I mean, we see that in the pro-life movement with pro-life messaging is we're not like, look at all these women that are getting abortions, and we're not just being like, we're not being rude towards them. We're showing them compassion and treating them as victims, because they are victims. And so similarly, we need to show kindness and love for these people who are victims of this gender ideology. And we're not going to sacrifice the truth, but we're also going to be compassionate. So another parent, LaDawn Severin, recently spoke up at a school board meeting, and she criticized the district's move to all of this LGBTQ plus stuff. And she said that she actually read some excerpts from a book that the district has confirmed it's in kindergarten classrooms for independent reading time. So the book, guys, actually, Moses, you're going to hate this. The book questions the ability of parents to accurately gender their children at birth. That is crazy. Crazy. I mean, wow. Are we really that far gone in our society that we don't know what a boy is and we don't know what a girl is? Wow. LaDawn said, this assaults the God-given identity of young males and young females. First graders are busy enough trying to master phonics and learning how to read. Why should we allow authority figures to plant seeds of doubt in their existence simply as a boy or a girl?
I can't even, I think I might have mentioned on the podcast, one thing that I always find is funny is when I go to the park, and I live in St. Paul, so everyone that I see at the park, I tend to assume is a extremely progressive person, and oftentimes I'll see little tells that tell me that I'm right in that assumption. At some point, but one thing my daughter does is she always goes up to, it's like, is your baby a boy or a girl? Because my daughter is very young, but she knows that there are two genders. No more.
You're not confusing her.
No less. And the thing about the parents, and occasionally there's a little bit of a hesitation, But they always answer the question. They know they can't tell a 3-year-old, well, we don't know yet.
Right.
Not sure, we'll have to wait until
They might
he
be
or she
bi.
tells us.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, So it's
Or
just
they.
like, right. If they said that, I would honestly just laugh, because Mary would be confused, my daughter, and that would be the right response, because it's
Yep.
nonsense. It's nonsense to say that about a kid.
Yep.
It just period is nonsense. Thank you.
I was talking to Joe Rigney, who's the one of my professors at my school, my prior school. But once he went into, I think it was Chick-fil-A with his son, who was probably like 5-ish, and there was a guy who was taking their order, and a person, and the boy, Joe's little son, said, "Daddy, is that a boy or a girl?" Because he couldn't tell. And Joe was like, "You know what? I'm not sure. That's a good question." And I feel like it's good because he like validated his response.
Yeah.
Of like, yeah, I'm not sure, and that's strange, and it's good that you're picking up on that.
Yeah.
But like you're saying, kids are not naturally people who are confused about if they're a boy or a girl. That only comes with the indoctrination of parents who are teaching them things that are untrue. So that's it on that story, you guys. I also want to share a really positive story from Iowa. We want to continue the trend of Midwest child first policies. We talked about one last week from Nebraska, which was so encouraging for us to hear about. So I just want to encourage you guys that these things are happening close to us. So this is about Iowa. This is based in Iowa. Iowa actually banned lessons on gender identity and sexual orientation in K-6 classrooms, both in public schools, but also in charter schools. So
love that.
I know Governor Kim Reynolds, who spoke at one of our annual dinners, she signed that piece of legislation last Friday, which is SF 496, which just so grateful for that. I'm going to briefly run down those 3 things that it accomplishes. The first thing is that it requires educators to notify parents if their child has changed their gender at school, which is awesome because parental rights matter. And parents should know if their kids are changing their gender at school.
And we know, and we've talked about this on the podcast, that some school districts are actively hiding that.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen that. I think a recent local example was in Madison, Wisconsin.
Yep.
And it's just like you may have trouble believing that public schools would actively hide information about a parent's child from those parents. And yet that is exactly what's happening, and that is why this bill is so necessary.
Exactly. The second thing that this legislation does is it make sure that library materials and school curriculums are publicly available online for parents to see and review. So that applies to public and charter schools. And that's just a really good step forward because that protects parents and kids' rights and makes sure that everything is accessible. Because I mean, if our tax dollars are paying for these resources and paying for the education of our children, we should know how they're being educated. So really like that transparency. The third thing that this legislation does is that it mandates that schools adopt a policy and process for parents to challenge material that they think is age inappropriate. And so that's also really awesome because it's a big win for parental rights. It also does the aforementioned things that I mentioned, just banning that sexual orientation, gender identity lessons in K-6 classrooms. So the opposition, of course, is not silent. The opposition decides to comment and says, quote, "It is wrong to remove other books just because someone's determined them not age appropriate or that there's some sexuality noted in it." That was State Senator Sarah Trone Garriott. And she says, quote, "I mean, that's part of life and learning how to live together and how to be a healthy person. Those are topics that are part of our world," which that is not true. It does not teach kids how to be a healthy person. It does not teach them or encourage them to be whole humans. It encourages them to see their bodies as something to be subverted, something to be changed. That's really the whole like dark irony of this movement is they're like, love yourself, be who you are. But then this whole movement encourages you to like, if you don't feel like you are who you are, to change yourself to fit like this figment of your imagination, which is not actually who you are.
Right. And they don't want you to hear from your pastor, this is who you are. Like your pastor doesn't have any authority, right, over your life and the other 6 days of the week. But your human sexuality teacher, or health class, whatever they call it, depends on how woke or unwoke the school district is. But that teacher, if they tell you, well, you're having trouble with your gender identity, maybe you are transgender, non-binary, etc. That person, or maybe you just found this on YouTube, and suddenly that becomes this truth about who you are that's so elemental, and nobody can challenge that without challenging your fundamental identity, and that often happens so quickly. That's why it's the one subset of this is called rapid onset gender dysphoria. It's come seemingly out of nowhere as a social contagion, but and once that's in place, it can't be challenged.
Yep.
To do so is in the current cultural atmosphere transphobic, as we've discussed.
It's so true. It really just boils down to the fact that without God, there's no reason for these things to be wrong, because you don't have the first mover, you don't have a limiting principle, you don't have a moral code without God to say, hey, this is actually what it means to be a man, this is what it means to be a woman, and there is no other. So that's the bottom line there. I think that's just such an encouraging story, though, that wow, Iowa is really truly protecting children. So very grateful for that, and maybe we'll be able to continue our theme of highlighting Midwest states that are winning for children. I would love to do that. Moses, why don't you go ahead and tell us who is running for president now, at least highlight, maybe let's say the top 3 candidates, and tell me how they're doing in the polling.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been some movement in the last few weeks. On May 24th, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced his run for president. Then I think very recently, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, a noted Trump critic. I think, though, that he played some role in Trump's administration.
Really?
He used to be very close with Trump. They're in some ways similar personalities. They're both brash, Northeastern figures, New Jersey, New York, who came up the greasy pole by the hard way, although Trump in real estate and being a billionaire, and Chris Christie in politics. But then they had a falling out. I don't even remember what that was about. I try not to pay too much attention to the little squabbles, right? But Chris Christie is running for president. Does anyone want that? No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I offended the one Chris Christie voter out there, but nobody wants Chris Christie to run for president. This is, and one thing I've realized as I've gotten older, I've been like, why are all these people running for president who have absolutely no chance? No chance in 1 million.
I'm always so confused.
Yeah.
Why is Kristi Noem running? I'm sorry.
Kristi Noem. Oh, she's not running.
Oh,
no.
She's not?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I included some polling results.
Oh,
but
okay.
what they
I was
do,
confused. I was like, what? This makes no sense. Okay.
No, and maybe she will, but pollsters will ask these questions. Do you support this person? And they are thinking of people who are running for president, and also people who are not running but may run for president. So in terms of Republicans who are running that you might have heard of and that you might consider voting for, obviously we have Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, Chris Christie, and I was about to mention, we heard yesterday that Mike Pence, former Vice President Mike Pence, will be announcing his run for president on June 7th at an event in Des Moines.
Which is so funny when he's like, I will be announcing it on June 7th. It's like, you just announced it, dude.
Well, I don't know if he announced it or if it's sort of leaked. Yeah. So
we already knew he was running, though.
Right. We knew he was running. We knew that he was one of many people who was jockeying for position. Other people would be Nikki Haley, former governor of South Carolina and ambassador to the UN. Also, Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina. And he's favored by people like Senator Mitch McConnell. So Senator Tim Scott is sort of like the Senate's candidate. The people in the Republican senators support him. And then there's the possibility also that former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will run. But other than that, there's a lot of no names.
Yeah, and also those are pretty solid people. I have my differences with them, but really the race is truly between Trump and DeSantis. And we already know, unfortunately. Well, I have my hunch as to I feel like Trump will get the nomination.
Well, that's very premature, Grace. And we should say MFC is not endorsing a candidate, but I did want to share the most recent polling, and it certainly shows that Trump has a convincing lead right now. So this is not the most recent poll, but I was looking at the recent polls, and I used 538. Which is an online poll tracking tool to find the most recent polls. But I like this poll because it had a huge sample. 3,500 likely Republican voters were asked who they support. 56% said Donald Trump, 22% picked Ron DeSantis, 5% picked Mike Pence, and nobody else cracked 5%. So it really is, on that level, a two-man race. And when you ask Donald Trump supporters, who's your second choice, 47% of them say Donald Trump. And when you ask Donald Trump supporters who their second pick is, it's Ron DeSantis. So it really is those two people who are jockeying for position. And Trump has a steady lead. However, Trump's lead over DeSantis has shrunk. It was it's a 34 percentage point gap now. It was a 44 percentage point gap earlier in mid-May. So there's signs that Governor DeSantis is climbing in the polls and Donald Trump is falling in the polls for various reasons.
He still has a huge lead, though.
Well, we can't read too much into that. But what's important is how a couple of things are important. So we need to be thinking, if I could back up for a second, why is this so important? Well, obviously, presidential election is always going to be important, but President Biden is really weak. Democrats are not in love with him. They don't. Many Democrats don't actually want him to run again. Ignoring the fact that he is running again and that he's not going to necessarily have any serious Democratic challengers. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is running against him, but he's kind of a crank. Very few Democratic voters are going to pull the lever for RFK Jr. So at this point, it seems like President Biden has the nomination in the bag, assuming that his health remains, acceptable to Democratic primary voters. But because he's weak, that really opens up a window for a Republican such as Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis to give a very strong showing. A lot of presidents have a relatively easy path to their second term. Yep. So that was true for George W. Bush. It was true for Bill Clinton. It was certainly true for Ronald Reagan, who won 49 states in 1984. Amazing, the only state he lost was Minnesota. But so there's a weak Democratic administration. So as believers, as Christians, as conservatives, one of the most important things you and I will be doing in the next year is more than likely pulling the lever in a primary or a caucus. In Minnesota, it's a straw poll at a caucus for a candidate, and who will go up against probably Joe Biden in November of next year. And that is going to be a momentous election. And of course, we know that Donald Trump, he started running for president the minute he belatedly admitted that he had not won in 2020. And that would just be unprecedented there's only been, I think, twice in American history where a president has lost an election and then come back later and won another election.
Wait, what were the other ones that did that?
Man, I want to say John Quincy Adams.
Really?
Which president
he knows his history, y'all.
Served non-consecutive terms. Oh, no, I was wrong. It was Grover Cleveland.
Oh, interesting.
He served in 1885 to 1889 and then again from 1893 to 1897. So same thing. He tried to come back after one term out of office and he was successful and was reelected. So if Trump comes into office, there's questions. There's questions about that. He's under, who knows how many legal investigations. I know at least 5 federal or state investigations, including the recent I'm not sure. Maybe that would not include. One of them has been settled, right? There was a civil case where it's not a criminal case, but he was deemed liable for sexual assault in order to pay money to a columnist in New York City. And then there's this stuff about election fraud. There's stuff about the classified documents, and there's a lot of negatives to Donald Trump. But many people also say, and this would be the case for Donald Trump, that nobody is going to win over independent voters like Donald Trump, and nobody then is going to, once they're in office, absolutely clean house in D.C. Of course, that's what he promised to do. And many people think that he could do that.
He's not very nice, but he does get the job done most of the time.
Well, that is, I think, a pretty good summary. But then we look at Ron DeSantis. If I could just take a little time to talk about these two front runners. So Ron DeSantis is sort of like, he is nicer. He does get stuff done. but he gets like more stuff done.
That's
and
what I was gonna
better.
say. He does better stuff.
Yeah, I think
he protects life more.
Right.
Mhm.
So Donald Trump has, and we'll get to that in a second. Donald Trump has actually really backed off his strong
Did you see
pro-life
his
position.
comment on Ron DeSantis?
Yes, in fact,
We should talk about that.
we're going to in a minute. We're gonna roll an ad.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, we'll roll an ad about Donald Trump's stance on abortion. But more or less, he's actually, I don't know how public this was, and so I can't say this is 100% for sure, but it seemed pretty clear behind the scenes that he was very angry about the Dobbs decision. He did not. He thought that the Supreme Court went much further than they should when they threw abortion laws back to the states. Now, of course, we disagree with that, and we should note these are 3 Supreme Court justices that Donald Trump nominated. So it's it's an easy situation for him to take credit for that. And yet he didn't. He was really disappointed about that. So I think that's interesting. But Governor DeSantis, I think a lot of people would say that he has not as much appeal with middle of the road voters, but he is smart like a fox, like smarter than Donald Trump possibly. Although both of them, by the standards of politicians, I would say are pretty intelligent and know how to reach their base. DeSantis just won re-election in Florida by an insane margin after barely winning his first race. So he is not someone I'm going to count out. Like Donald Trump has the lead in the polls, but I really think we need to wait and see. Polling in primaries is actually really difficult because it's 50 different races, right? It's not one race. You have to win. You don't have to win every state, but you have to win a majority of Republican delegates who are decided in, like, let's say 25 states that really matter. Mm-hmm. And it's so expensive to do a poll in Iowa and a poll in South Carolina and a poll in Michigan and a poll in Minnesota and all of these other states, and then try to say, well, like in 2016, Minnesota voted for Rubio, I think. Like that. Oh, really? That doesn't actually.
I do not remember that.
That doesn't actually matter. Rubio only won a handful of primaries. Minnesota continued its tradition of not picking winners, and I say that with all respect to Senator Rubio. But so basically, what I'm telling you guys is that we need to pray. We need to learn more. We may think that we know all about these people, but in fact, we actually need to learn more and prayerfully do our research on Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis or Mike Pence or whoever we think we might be interested in voting for. And we also need to have a second choice because your favorite candidate might not be the nominee. So think about, or might not even be in the race by the time we vote in the Minnesota caucus. So think about that. Pray about that for next year. One other thing is, and I was going to say Donald Trump's stance on life. There's a new ad in Iowa, and Iowa will be the first state to vote. It'll be in late January or early February.
How come Iowa's always the first? Is it because it's a swing state, or what is the?
Well, actually, there's some drama about that. So
I've been so confused about that, and I feel like it's probably an obvious answer.
Well, it's not an obvious answer. It's more or less arbitrary. The individual states get to decide. Is that true? It's either individual states or the Democratic National Committee and the Republican National Committee who decide which states go first. And this year, Iowa will not be the first state for Democrats. Democrats decided that Iowa was not racially diverse enough to be the first state on their calendar. So their first state will be, I think, South Carolina, which is another historic early primary state or early caucus state. The Iowa caucus also had a ton of problems in 2020. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but
yeah, I do remember that actually.
Yeah, it was like nobody knew whether Bernie Sanders or what's his name, Pete Buttigieg, the former politician Pete Buttigieg, who will never ever run for anything ever again. Anyway, okay.
So this ad, Moses, do you want to roll it for that?
Yeah, let's roll the clip.
Go.
Iowa lawmakers have approved a heartbeat bill.
The bill would ban most abortions after a fetal heartbeat is detected, which can happen within 6 weeks of the start of pregnancy.
But if death is determined when a heart stops beating, then doesn't a beating heart indicate life?
I'm pro-life, and I think that morally, we have an obligation to do everything that we can.
Trump said in an interview on Monday, if you look at what DeSantis did, he signed 6 weeks, and many people would feel that was too harsh.
The former president alienates himself from the pro-life community by saying Ron DeSantis, who signed a heartbeat bill in the state of Florida, that was too harsh. The pro-life community expects better than that.
Okay, so what we saw there, we saw Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds,
Right.
And we just love her. We had her at our annual dinner, as Grace mentioned, and we also saw Bob Vanderplatz, and he's the CEO of our sister organization in Iowa.
That's right.
He's an extreme. If you're a social conservative and you want to win the Iowa caucus, you need to be friends with Bob Vanderplatz, and for him to publicly say, Republicans and conservatives, pro-lifers deserve better than Donald Trump on the issue of abortion, that's really telling. And that could be an indication that some pro-lifers are not going to give Donald Trump the loyal support that they did in 2016 and 2020. So we'll find out. The big thing there is stay tuned. And now,
So speaking of annual dinners, Moses,
Yeah.
please announce the date and the speaker of our 2023 annual dinner.
yes, folks, we would love to have you join us on September 8th at the Doubletree Hotel in Doubletree by Hilton, Bloomington, I think it's called, for our annual dinner, our 40th anniversary annual dinner with, drum roll please, Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma. He is one of
awesome.
the absolute foremost champions of life, family, and religious freedom in this country. He is someone who does not just talk the talk, but he walks the walk. He provides an example
Facts.
of biblical citizenship and of strong leadership. And we're so thrilled to have him. We haven't had a U.S. Senator in a long time as our speaker. And we think that Senator Lankford is one of the absolute best exemplars that we could have had if we could pick any speaker of what it means to take your faith seriously, to take the Bible seriously, but then to succeed in politics. What does that look like? Is that even possible? And I think you will love to hear what Senator Lankford has to say on that. So you can pre-register right now today by going to mfc.org/AD2023. You can fill in a form,
Oh,
and
it's
then
already up. Wow.
it's already up.
I'm
You
looking
will
this
then
up.
be you will be the first to receive an email when our ticket sales link goes live, and you can then buy your tickets, sponsor a table. We have lots of opportunities. Of course, Grace and I will be there. We'd love to meet you guys in person. So that's our annual dinner. And now I wanted to, as our new tradition goes, Grace, I wanted to close us out with a verse from the Bible. So what I picked this week is Hebrews 10. And part of the reason I found it, and then I thought of this actually, but my daughter and I were reading a kid's book last night called The Garden, the Curtain, and the Cross. And it's telling the story of Easter, but it's especially focusing on how that moment when Jesus is on the cross and the curtain that separates the most holy place in the temple from the rest of the temple is torn from top to bottom. And that's this incredible end to the old covenant, this end to the having priests and sacrifices that have to be between us and God. And so that's the context in which the author of Hebrews is writing in chapter 10. I'm going to read verses 19 through 25. Therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter the holy places by the blood of Jesus, by the new and living way that he opened for us through the curtain, that is, through his flesh. And since we have a great priest over the house of God, let us draw near with a true heart and full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. And there's just so much there that I could talk about. And I even if I was capable of unpacking that, I couldn't in the time allowed. But I just think if I were to focus on one thing there, consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. I think that's so important. And it's something that I want to be better at. I want to be better at helping my friends, my coworkers, my family members love better, love Christ more. I want to point them to Christ, to his sacrifice, and I want to help them to love each other more and to do good works. How can we bless our city, bless our families, just do the good works that God has set out for us to do in this life? So I just think on those amazing words of Scripture, we're coming in for a landing. And we're so grateful to you guys for listening to or watching this episode of the Family Beacon. Remember, to get this up, the fastest way you can get this in your inbox is to subscribe to our emails, mfc.org/subscribe. That's also the quickest way to find out more information about our annual dinner, or go to mfc.org/AD2023. So thanks for watching and listening, and God bless.
Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you're up to date on life, family, and religious freedom. You can follow us on Instagram at MN Family Council and subscribe to us on YouTube to watch our content. Get the facts, stand for truth.